Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yeah, yeah. Well, lo lovely to meet you. Is it am I correct in saying it's Louise?
Yeah, Louis is probably the easiest way to.
I love it. I love it. And happy to have you here. We, had DAC for our coffee subscription and we kind of have this ability to chat with the, roaster or representative and kind of just talk about the coffees and about DAC and so yeah, just remarkably excited to have the opportunity. Thanks for taking it, Louis. Um, yeah, how's your day going though, just to begin with?
I mean, it's very good. We were in Korea about a week ago
Mhm.
for World of Coffee Busan. So then we got back a week ago. So getting back into the rhythm of production, and receiving new greens and profiling. And we also have two new roasters starting now. So we're in the middle of a training session as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite busy, but also very dynamic. So it's a lot of fun.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, this is, my first time meeting you. So kind of I would love to just hear about your story in coffee, where are you from? Have you been with DAC from the beginning? All of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you probably heard the story of kind of DAC in general from Christina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so maybe more about kind of my background. I'm originally Canadian, from Montreal.
Okay.
And then Veronique, who's the other co-founder, let's say, of DAC, and also my wife. So we met in Montreal 10 years ago.
Okay.
We moved to Europe together. Initially lived in Italy for a year,
Oh.
then to London after, and then we moved to Amsterdam. And we both initially worked when we moved to Amsterdam for about 3 years.
Hmm.
And then 4 years ago, we decided to start a coffee roastery. We had almost no knowledge of coffee or very limited knowledge of coffee. So I'm a financial engineer, and Veronique works in branding, or she worked in branding before.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
had more of a, I would say, business experience more than the specific coffee experience. But then we learned, on the go. We learned very fast, and now yeah, here we are. So it's been about 4 years now.
Okay. Wow. That's crazy. And I've never been to Montreal. I don't even know, like, is the coffee scene in Amsterdam comparable to Montreal at all? Is it a completely different thing?
It's completely different, I would say.
Yeah. Wow.
So Montreal received a lot of immigration after the Second World War,
Okay.
mainly from, or not mainly, but a big community of Italians and Portuguese.
Okay. Wow.
So the coffee culture is kind of driven also by the size of these communities in Montreal. So there's still a large quantity of cafes that will do the
Mm.
dark roast Italian style espressos. And then specialty is still, there's a lot of very cool cafes in Montreal,
Mhm.
but because of that dynamic, there's a very kind of the variance in quality and in choice is quite broad.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
whereas I think Amsterdam, if you try to find specialty coffee, it'll be more where everything is in a very similar style,
Yeah.
um, a bit more unique color, let's say. But I think at the same time, the market in Amsterdam, I think people have maybe, they overhype it a little bit.
Okay.
So there's quite good roasters based here, but not so many good cafes, which is a bit surprising,
Okay.
and a little bit disappointing.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been to Amsterdam, but it was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was when I was kind of just starting my coffee journey, and so I, to be honest, at the time when I went, I wasn't particularly interested in finding good cafes or anything of the sort, and so yeah, now years later, knowing you've got some great roasters there, and kind of in the Netherlands, so to speak, and just in that area of Europe, and so I, in my mind, the cafes must be like absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that's a fair assumption as well, but it's what everyone assumes.
yeah,
But then they arrive here, and I think they expect a much larger quantity of very good cafes, where it's still kind of a few very good ones, and the rest are more maybe mediocre than.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel you. It's a the whole cafe world, along with being a roaster, depending on who you are, is very interesting. And so the specialty coffee industry in St. Louis is like kind of steadily growing, so to speak. And so
Mm-hmm.
feel like we're getting to an even more exciting phase in, like, I guess the cafes in St. Louis, than kind of going to different ones almost now all the time, so to speak, just to try the differences and variations of flavor, roast profile, and just aesthetics and all the above. And so it's yeah, it's quite interesting. So if I remember, Dak doesn't have a cafe now. Is that correct? I forget.
That's correct.
Okay,
So
but
we
hopefully you
only
will.
maybe um, we we travel quite a lot to meet our customers. So we meet essentially people like you, and we get kind of a very first-hand look at their reality, what managing a cafe is like.
Okay.
So we're directly exposed to how different of a business it is to manage a cafe versus a roastery.
Hmm.
And because we don't have the knowledge of either hospitality or of a cafe, then we're careful in kind of stepping into this completely different business. So at least for now, the roastery is there's still a lot to do. Um, it's going quite well. We're expanding, so that's taking a lot of our time and a lot of our resources, and it's enough for now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was an absolute delight being able to see y'all in at SCA Expo in Chicago, and to
Mm-hmm.
even there I was just like, this is great. Like, I'm tasting tasty coffee here just from you guys, and I'm like, what a fun time. And so I recently had a call with a roastery in Europe being like, should we even go to like the expos in St. Louis? And I was like, personally, I think it does help. It's being able to meet you guys in person and be like, oh my gosh, like we're about to have you guys in the shop, and all the above was just too neat. I was having a little too much fun over there. Yeah, no, well, that's wonderful. So in regards to how Dax started, if I remember correctly, it was started by, I think, a couple who were from Montreal, right?
Exactly.
Lovely. And kind of, had you what you had mentioned, they kind of moved over with y'all, or y'all kind of just came over and were just like, let's see if we can kind of make it work, or for the most part, right?
I mean, there's not this very romantic story about how we started. It's more of a almost a trial and error, if you will. We initially wanted to do a subscription. Um, so before starting a coffee business, I was working in venture capital in technology investments, where a lot of the business models are subscription as a service.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do the same in coffee, but we very quickly realized that it's very difficult and very expensive in um, running ads and maintaining a huge base of subscribers.
Yeah.
So we just naturally pivoted to doing mainly wholesale.
Yep.
And then initially we also thought that we would do kind of a local market, but
Mm-hmm.
we tried it out and then we ended up kind of branching out quickly and going very unique coffees, international clients. So it
Mm-hmm.
kind of happened very naturally. But I can't really say that we had this very, you know, this very well-defined plan that that's what we wanted to do initially. We fell into it. It worked really well. We like this type of product also, so then it makes it easier to choose the coffees and to be very passionate about it also.
Yes, yes. I mean, to have your coffees, kind of, and be able to hand them to our subscribers and to ship them out, it was probably one of the more, even just like your packaging is just absolutely lovely. And random fun fact about Comet and or me and kind of just the my team, we actually are not a big fan of boxes, but yours is our favorite. I don't know what that is, but we've just come and gone with different box kind of packaging from a lot of different roasters that we've carried and worked with, and we've just they've always been okay, but yours we've found to be the very simplest, and actually it just like it works, you know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
it was kind of nice to have that, to be honest, let alone, I mean, I'm sure you get this all the time, but your packaging, the aesthetics are just always fantastic. And so it was an absolute delight to kind of have that and people be excited to be like, this looks really cool. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot. And I also understand where you're coming from with these boxes.
Yeah.
When we initially started using the boxes, we were forced to move to boxes because
Ooh.
there was an error in the finish of our bags, of our 250-gram bags, and
Mm.
our label for our labels that identify the type of coffee and the processing in the region
Yeah.
wouldn't stick to the bag.
Oh no.
So there was a period of about 2 weeks where we sent out a lot of orders, and people would open the boxes with blank bags and like a little ball of all the labels. So so it was a nightmare. We decided to switch the boxes, and then the initial production wasn't optimal. So
Yeah.
they would crumble during shipping and they would look very ugly on the retail shelf. So there was a lot of work in the background to try to find the right material and the right supplier. Um, and now we're quite happy with the result. It also allows us to have fully recyclable boxes that are only cardboard paper, and then maybe a different material for the bags as well because they don't have to be branded or very special because they're inside a box. So it gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of how we package.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I guess you've really done it because even the boxes are pretty solid, so to speak. And so it's kind of nice just to, like, I don't know, just have a solid box compared to others, which is an absolute delight. Yeah. Yeah. Well, to kind of jump into kind of the coffees that we used and just to hear about them, I've got to start with the milky cake because man, it's a staple of yours. It's so
Yeah,
good. Like, how, I don't even know like the story. And Christina had kind of mentioned that I think this is like a coffee only you guys have from Diego or something like that. Yeah, yeah, kind of
yeah.
walk us through that.
So it wasn't initially created just for us.
Mhm.
So we received samples from an exporter in Colombia that do very unique coffees, and it was one of the coffees on the table. It was wildly different from anything that we tried before, but we thought it was super interesting. So we bought initially a small quantity of it. Um, it worked quite well, but it was, I think, twice as expensive initially. So it was more of a premium offering, smaller volume,
Yeah.
and people liked it quite a lot. And eventually, I think a few months after, the exporter reached out to us again because there was more volume of that coffee that was initially supposed to go to Asia, where I believe it was a Korean customer that canceled the order. So they were stuck with a lot of volume in a warehouse in Europe, and they needed some help essentially to not lose the coffee.
Mm,
So we said we would take it and then we tried to kind of push it out and do a lot of very cool marketing with it to try to release it. And it worked really, really well. People went nuts for that really unique profile. And then after that, we decided that we would have it on an almost permanent basis.
mhm,
And it turns out that the volume that we need to have it on an almost permanent basis is enough so that essentially Diego does this lot now almost only for us because what we need is what he can produce.
mhm.
Um, but it's what I drink. My flat white, the one flat white I drink every day is a milky cake all year round. So I don't get tired of it. I know what people, I
Yeah.
know why everyone likes it so much.
Yeah, it is absolutely delicious. And this was one of the coffees that every once in a while we get a coffee like this, and I genuinely, like, personally, if I were to be a customer, I would easily pay like almost double the price for it, you know? And so I was
Mhm.
kind of surprised at like the ability to kind of give it to our customers and what's, what we call our approachable coffees for our subscription. Cause, it just kind of fit that bill perfectly. And I was like, almost everyone who's come in to pick it up, I've been like, you're basically getting a crazy coffee that's way better than you can. It literally is just absolutely insane. And yeah, on the cupping table, it just floored us. It really just it was a standout. And I mean, just the name is just indicative of it. And so it's
Yeah.
really, yeah. And that's probably one of the things that I love most about even kind of how you go about saying which coffees are which. Milky cake, it gives you what you're going to taste. And man, was it amazing. Yeah, the cardamom, the pistachio, like the vanilla cake, the honey, it was like just insane. And I was just like, oh Lord, like I'm so happy right now. I'm dying. But yeah, so briefly, tell us just a tad bit about Diego, because I got to see him at Expo in April, but he's a really well-known producer in the world, and so
Mhm.
is he a producer in which like you even get other coffees from, or yeah.
We did before, so we've had a few. Um, also from, let's say, from the Bermudez family. So think Valparaiso. There's also Alex Bermudez, which is Diego's brother. So we've had a few different ones. Um, he's exceptional in his understanding of microbiology in coffee and kind of being an innovator in coffee. So he does um, very unique things with his coffee and all scientifically based. So that's super interesting. It's super interesting to talk to him about kind of what he thinks is the next step or what he's working on.
Yeah.
Um, but we try to have some more coffees from him every once in a while.
Mhm,
And they're always extremely unique
mhm.
and very, very good.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, he's doing amazing stuff, and to be able to have anything from him at any time, we always get just absolutely excited. Yeah. So, to people, who, they're in their house right now or in their office and they have this coffee and they're wondering like how can I brew this as close to how Dak brews it as possible? Like, do you have any quick brewing, like, oh, like maybe try this, or yeah, do you have any just kind of brewing guideline
And is that for filter?
for filter? Yeah.
So we like specifically for this particular coffee, we like um, higher extraction brews.
Mhm.
So we will do a slightly finer grind size than we would for other coffees.
Mm,
Then a longer ratio, so maybe 18 to 1 or almost as high as a 20 to 1.
mhm,
And then we'll target a brew time of about 3.5 to 4 minutes. just because what we want to pull out with this particular coffee is all of the sweetness and all of those cakey, spicy notes, more than let's say the bright notes that maybe you would want more in a traditional wash. So we'll have a slightly different approach because we want a different result for this particular coffee.
Hmm, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the way we brew at the cafes, we do a 1 to 15 ratio. And we kind of punch everything that we can out of it. And there's always variables in which I'm kind of unsure which ones are true in regards to how they do it. But our water at the cafe isn't amazing. We're brewing with 200 ppm, which is not ideal.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's such an odd thing, but to be able to take these coffees and to still get really good results is like encouraging for us. And I don't know what everyone at home is doing as well. And St. Louis water is probably around where we're at as well. But I love the idea of kind of extending that to get that sweetness out. That's brilliant. To be honest, I did not even in any way think about that, but that for this coffee, fantastic. I'll have to try that 100%. I love it. Yeah. Well, kind of moving on to just the next coffee, the Alchemist. This was, I have to say, on the cupping table, it was crazy. It was just like it was one of the top ones, and we just could not differentiate what it would be. Like so when we found out it was the Alchemist, it was like what? Like wild. This is a crazy coffee. Yeah, how did you also kind of come across this coffee? Because it's hard for us to find coffees like this, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so this is a coffee that we've had every year now for the last 3 years.
Oh.
Um, and we bought in very small quantity initially.
Uh-huh.
The price was also much higher initially, just because it was kind of a small lot, um, more exclusive or more special.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've become good friends with the producer. So we visited him in Rwanda as well.
Yeah.
And through discussions with him, we mentioned that our volume, had been growing, um, and we had good discussions with him about his harvest, his access to infrastructure and equipment, and kind of what he would be able to do to maintain this level of quality in a higher volume. And we're still now working with him. And because we can commit to such large volume of this particular coffee, the very cool thing is that we can sign a contract for very set volume with him, where he can then go to the bank in Rwanda and he can get financing against kind of pre-booked volume. So it helps him to manage his season, maybe upgrade his equipment and his infrastructure, and just generally kind of improve um, all of his coffees. And we also get kind of a large volume of a coffee that's very unique and very very nice.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Yeah, it's not often we come across experimental, even kind of different um fermented, process in Rwanda. And this one is just an absolute delight. I think, your tasting notes were mango, red ripe fruit, and cocoa. Like, I think I even threw in there like dark sumo orange and like a holiday pear and like overripe raspberry. Like, it was just such a fun coffee to taste. Like, it's one of those coffees that not that it's like and again in a way it almost felt like an exotic, just like crazy coffee that like I would pay more for, which was
Mhm.
again just like blowing my mind. But yeah, just tasting it, there was something always exciting in my mouth happening, and I was like, wow, this is it's pretty neat. Yeah, yeah, no, I love it, and I love to see Rwandan coffees as well. That's kind of something we're seeing a little bit more of, and we're very happy about it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's kind of same thing for this one. Do you have any? just brewing guidelines or things you would suggest?
Um, Definitely, I think this one we would have a different approach. I think you described it well. It's a very jammy coffee.
Mhm.
So we like a little bit more um, maybe intensity in the brew and a little bit more texture as well. So we would brew it at a shorter ratio. So maybe closer to what you guys do in the cafe. So a 15 to 1. And then a slightly shorter brew time as well. So it would be closer to a 3 minutes at a 15 to 1 ratio to
Mhm.
get a slightly thicker brew with a
Mhm.
lot of these kind of very jammy red fruit notes that are a little bit more intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Oddly enough, that's like exactly how it brewed even for me. It was like just over 3 minutes, like just over it, and it was like just perfect. It was like I think I did that brew, and I was like, I think it's perfect. Let me try another brew just to make sure. And it was like just a hair not as good. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. So the first brew is just like we nailed
Yeah.
it. I love it. Yeah. So, the next coffee, the grenadine, was personally my favorite of all. We've had, to give you an understanding of how much we love Nestor and Adrian Lasso, we've had probably six of their coffees since the beginning of this year that we've had from
Wow,
I
okay.
think five different roasters. And I think almost all of them have also been different varieties that they've had, which is randomly fun. We've had the Ombligon, from Cat Felix. We had a Caturra Chiroso or something along those lines from Little Wolf. We had a Sidra from um, someone else. I don't remember. Then we had a Sidra Bourbon, and then and so it was just like we've just like everything we've had from this producer amazing, you know, blowing my mind. And so your tasting notes were remarkably spot on, and it was just like, yep. And it's amazing. It's so berry like. It's so fruity. It's in your face. We couldn't be happier with it. Yeah, yeah. So how did you kind of even come across Nestor? You know, yeah.
Uh, so he's a very good friend of the exporter that we work with, which is the same exporter that we source all of our Colombian coffees from. And so they act mainly as I guess, almost like consultants, sourcing consultants, if you will, where they will find very unique coffees for us. And so we met, or we were first introduced to Nestor's coffee about 2 years ago. I believe the first was this same lot, was the natural Sidra 2 years ago, and it just blew our minds. It was kind of a red candy in a coffee, and we'd never had that before. Um, and then we visited Colombia. We met Nestor, and we were completely shocked also to realize that he's only 22
Yeah.
and he's this superstar producer doing amazing thing and just really really young. um and since then we have had the same experience as you guys. Everything that we try from him is on point, is very very unique,
Hmm.
very well done. And so we want to keep working with him to showcase also a breadth of possibilities within a single farm. So he can do so many different things that it's very interesting to have a lot of his coffees. This one in particular is also one of my favorites. Um, it's just a smack in the face,
So sorry.
red flavors, and not overly fermented, not overly boozy, just done very very well.
Yeah, yeah. It's wonderful to be having these really interesting fermentations from these producers. And reading on your website, I think this was a fermentation in which they used. Is it called like mostos or musts, or what is it called?
Yeah, it's mosto in Spanish. I
Okay.
believe it's a direct translation of the must, which is kind of the they use the must maybe in wine making. So the the juice of the fruits.
Yes. Yeah.
So they use that to activate the fermentation. And sometimes they'll use the mosto, for example, of a geisha to add a little bit more interesting flavors, a little bit more quality to a catura, for example. So they'll do these different things. And I think a lot of people, us included, sometimes think that the producers will try, we'll do a 72-hour anaerobic fermentation and let's see what the result is. At least with Nestor and this group of producer, the reality is very scientifically driven. So they know um, chemically what happens during the fermentation. They track the temperature and the pressure during the fermentation. They will record the Brix content of their cherries to know how much sugar will be in the fermentation,
Yeah.
and to be able to repeat it as consistently as possible. So there's a lot more science going on at origin than sometimes we think about.
Yeah. 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 It's crazy. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, it's a world that, and no matter how many times I try to dip my toes in, I'm like, it's so much. There's so much happening. And I'm so intrigued and, will try to learn as much as I can from afar. But that's about it. Yeah. Kind of the same question, do you have any brewing tips?
I think for this one, it kind of depends on the result that you're looking for. So I would personally like the two extremes, where you could have on a finer grind, a very well extracted, maybe thicker, and then you get more jammy and a little bit of a chocolate aftertaste.
Mm,
Whereas if you go with a coarser grind, then you get something that's a lot more clean and candy-like. So it
mm,
really depends on the result. I like both, um,
mm.
but it would depend on my preference that day or what I'm looking for when I'm brewing this coffee.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. No, that was perfect. And and again, I can't say this enough. That was my favorite coffee of all of them. It was too much fun. It was really just too much fun. And I was so
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Well, so we had also the Vanilla Sky and just super super interesting. It's not there's so many things interesting about this coffee. Honestly. But yeah, briefly, yeah, again, kind of same thing. How'd you come across this coffee is crazy. It's from Bolivia, and like like what happened there?
Um, so there's not much volume coming out of Bolivia. Obviously, it's a very small country.
Mhm.
And the Los Rodriguez family, that is the producer of this particular coffee,
Mhm.
uh, are kind of I think second or third generation producers. But a few years ago, or 30 years ago, if I'm correct, the industry was dying in Bolivia.
Mhm.
And so the Rodriguez family started buying up farms and focusing on agroforestry and quality cherries and specialty coffee. And they
Yeah.
visited a lot of very well-known producers. So in Panama, for example, to get best practices. They went to Costa Rica as well to learn about fermentation. They brought back some seeds from Kenyan varieties, Ethiopian varieties, and then they started rebuilding the industry in Bolivia.
Mhm.
It's still quite small, so there's still very little volume that comes out of it, but now it's extremely high quality,
Mhm.
very interesting profiles. And so the Los Rodriguez family focus mainly on very clean processing. So we like their naturals specifically because they're very hard to detect as naturals on a cupping table, which is extremely interesting. And the Vanilla Sky specifically is a Batian variety, which is originally from Kenya, but grown in Bolivia and processed using the Rodriguez family kind of approach to processing. So you get this very unique mix of the body or the texture that you can get from Kenyan coffees,
Yeah.
the super interesting climate and terroir that you get from Bolivia, and then a very clean and natural that maybe is slightly unexpected for this type of processing. A
Yeah.
very, very unique coffee again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely insane. So, oddly enough, I kind of just came up with a question because I have a couple customers who come in, to our cafe and they're like, they're kind of like, I prefer to buy coffees they're always high in elevation. And I actually just am now realizing I'm looking at the notes that it says it's 1600 meters. And so from your perspective as a roaster, I mean, is elevation ever a factor that you ever consider ever for anything, so to speak? Or is it truly just like you go off of taste and that's, it?
We no, we go off of cup profile mainly,
Yeah.
and naturally everything that we buy ends up being high elevation, but it's not a single variable where we say we will prefer to buy above 1800 meters, for example, because certain region will have maybe slightly lower elevation, but then they'll have a better climate or maybe better soil where it gives interesting cup profiles as well. Um,
Oh,
as an example, we do buy some interesting lots from Brazil, and Brazil is always very kind of limited elevation, maybe 1200 meters, but there's still some very interesting lots happening there. It's a more complicated. Um, there's more variables to look at than only elevation.
yeah. Yeah. No, that completely makes sense. So, as a roaster with these four coffees, um, in an odd way, like how was roasting them? You're talking to me and I've never roasted coffee. Are there certain coffees that are, I'm assuming a little bit more maybe challenging, so to speak, or might take another go or two? Like, were these all ones you had to work with a lot or a little, or yeah, what was that process kind of like from you guys?
I think maybe the milky cake is the easiest to talk about because it's the single coffee that we roast the most.
Mhm.
And part of the genius of Diego is also the consistency in his profiles from harvest to harvest,
Yeah.
which means it's also extremely consistent in the roaster. Um, so this coffee we roast almost every day. Um, it's extremely consistent. We know exactly how it will behave in the roaster, and we know exactly how to approach our filter and espresso profile. So that one is fairly easy. Um, the Alchemist we roast quite a lot also, so we know how it will behave. I think the hardest of all of these coffees is the Bolivians
Hmm.
because there's very little volume coming out of Bolivia, and they do so many different varieties at so many different elevations, so density as well. Then the approach is almost always different. So it's on a per coffee basis. So we really have to start to work with the coffee to figure out how it will react in the roaster.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I don't know too much about Bolivia. So kind of hearing this is very interesting to me to think about now moving forward of like, oh man, if I come across a Bolivian, now I understand just a hair bit more of, kind of what's behind it, so to speak. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, it sounds like so you said you guys have been open since what, for 4 years or so, right?
Yeah, exactly.
4 years or so. So, kind of within your time within the coffee industry, being in Amsterdam and looking at people, are there certain people in the coffee industry as a whole, whether they're, other roasters or, competitors or farmers or exporters that you kind of like look up to and you kind of want to tell other people, hey, like you should check them out or, you should pay more attention to them. Yeah.
Um, I think. looking at competitors, I will like roasters for maybe different reasons,
Mm,
just because I'm not coming at it from the same perspective as a customer who maybe would choose to drink coffees from a particular roaster very often. So I'm a huge fan of Onyx in the US
yeah, yeah.
for for their branding and for their content.
Hmm.
I think that's one thing that is very, very difficult to do at scale and to maintain kind of this consistency across different channels with different people kind of presenting their brewing recipe, but also um, across their Instagram, their website, and their packaging. So on that side of the business, I like Onyx a lot. I also like Stay in New York a lot
Yeah,
for their very narrow focus on extremely clean washed coffees,
yeah,
and to be able to do that well and to stay within kind of within their lane, um, staying true to like one very specific type of coffee and kind of doing that very well. I have a lot of respect for that as well. I think those are the main two that I can think of now. I think other roasters in Europe we know for and we like for the quality of the roasting.
yeah,
I think Prologue based in Denmark are for all of the coffees that we tried, they were always very well roasted. So we like them a lot. Um, and I think the last ones that I say would be Morgon that are based in Sweden.
hmm, hmm,
And I have a lot of respect for the fact that they choose to do only a limited number of coffees every year,
mm,
and they will work with the same producers on a regular basis. So I think having that focus on very good relationships with a limited number of producers and becoming very good at roasting coffees that they know, I think that is something that
yeah,
I have a lot of respect for as well. So maybe less about kind of the quality of the roasting and more about decisions that they made in business and their approach to the product that I identify with a lot, that I have a lot of respect for.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting that yeah, it not only their quality, but yeah, the decisions that impact the industry and kind of the flow of it and whatever they're doing is very big, and it's kind of something I always forget about. And so kind of just being in the St. Louis industry and kind of seeing the local roasteries and cafes doing things, I'm now like trying to pay more attention because it's like, oh man, like they're doing a great job. Like re-
Mm.
really proud of them. Yeah, yeah. So, looking at DAC moving into the future, do you guys have any like long-term goals or exciting things coming up that, I don't know, they're like we should be on the lookout for, or yeah. I don't,
Uh, I mean, for anyone who has roasted coffee before, consistency at scale is the hardest thing to do. So for now, we keep growing quite steadily. But before we have any kind of wild plans or any weird or cool projects, we want to make sure that we can have our systems and our processes in place to be able to maintain the quality and the consistency um, that customers expect, and that requires a lot of work internally. So for the next few months, that's what we're going to be focusing on, is establishing kind of processes and systems that means that the quality of the coffee is always up to standard.
yeah.
Um,
No,
it may not be as exciting as we're going to open here or we're going to do this one thing, but the most important thing is the product, and that's the primary focus of what
yeah.
we have to focus on first.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, obviously us being able to have you guys like we loved it. We absolutely loved it. I already have I think two people who already got back to me and were like, dude, the grenadine crazy or the milk cake crazy or that vanilla sky man, and so I've already had a couple people be like, This is a good time. And oddly enough, it was a funny time, I guess, to order you guys because I had three separate customers all say I was about to order from Dak. And so that was just like so funny. Just randomly, they were like, yeah, either I had him a little bit ago and I wanted to have him again, or I haven't had him and I've been dearly wanting to try them. And so it's really neat to be able to do this so that people have a better understanding of, yeah, just how great Dak is, and just to be able to have you guys was an absolute delight. Yeah, yeah. Well, to be honest, that kind of takes up all my questions and time. Yeah, I mean, if you have anything to add, you are more than welcome. But
No, I mean, I just want to, yeah, I want to say thank you as well because, part of what we do is represented by the cafes that buy the coffee and then brew the coffee. So part of our representation is through you guys. So it would only be possible, it's only possible because you guys do a really good job of representing the coffee. So we're always kind of happy to hear that there's good feedback and to have this open line of communication as well. And maybe one of our next trip will make our way to St. Louis and we'll come and see you guys.
you have no idea. So I tell every roaster this: if you make it to St. Louis, dude, we will house you. We will give you transport. We will give you everything to make it work if you can just get here. Like, so just, yeah, just remember that. Because I would love that like so much. You have no idea. We'd be just Dak crazy. I'm done. Well, I love it. Well, you can see the this interview will be posted to our website, and it's kind of for our subscribers to see, and you're able to kind of on our website cometstl.com. You can even like, it's like a free little like sign up to be a member. You know, it's just our way to be like, so you're into the system. But you can go and kind of see this if you want. I will definitely be sending this to you obviously as well. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, cannot thank you enough, Louis. It was an absolute pleasure. The coffees are amazing. Looking forward to working with you guys again. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you for your time as well. And yeah, hopefully we do this again.
Yeah, let's go. All right. Well, you have a great rest of your day, Louis. Bye.
All right. Thank you. You too.